it was so over the top. It was like this giant silver structure and this giant swing and people swinging him, and it occurred to me that anyone else in this world would be totally embarrassed because it was so over the top. But it didn't concern Swami at all. It's sort of like, hey, these people want it. I'll give them what they want. I'll give them what they want till they want what I have to give.
Welcome to Love is the Path, a special podcast series that invites you to journey down memory lane as we relive the cherished world conferences and the joyous celebrations of Swami's birthdays. I'm Suraj Parthasarathi, coming to you from Los Angeles. Together we will revisit these sacred moments, reflect on their timeless messages, and draw inspiration to walk the path of love Swami has shown us. Today, on the very first episode, we have Dr. Phil Gosselin, the Zone Chair of the North American countries, and someone who has attended 8 out of the 10 world conferences. Welcome, Dr. Phil. Sai Ram. Dr. Phil Gosselin, thank you so much for speaking with me.
Thank you. Sai Ram.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about, just before we get into the Sathya Sai Baba of it all, why don't you tell me about just your background, where you grew up, and what the early part of your life was like?
I grew up mostly in Storrs, Connecticut, at the University of Connecticut. My father was a professor. There was also some time out in Chicago and Ohio and things like that. Went to college in New York. When I graduated, I wanted to find a guru. I went to see Swami, and he captured my heart. And I spent a total of 4 years in India. 1 year there the first time from 71 to 72. And since then, I've tried to stay in touch with Swami by being as much a part of the Sathya Sai International Organization as possible.
Yes, well, tell me a little bit about how you even came to this conclusion that you wanted to find a guru, that you were looking for some kind of spiritual connection. That seems like such an interesting moment.
Well, in the mid 60s, I was a high school student, and I came across the Yogananda autobiography of a yogi, and they also taught a little bit about the Bhagavad Gita and Ravi Shankar and things like that. I got to college, I was influenced by the Evans Wentz books, and when I was a sophomore, the Swamis from India started coming. It was like now 1967. And I used to meet with as many of those as I could, and came to the conclusion that I would go to India and try and find the greatest guru. And then in 1969, my senior year, there was a series of coincidences involving an article about Swami in Newsweek magazine, material I found from Dick Bach, and my father gave me Sathya Sai Baba Chants the Bhajans for Christmas, even though he just knew I had a vague interest in Eastern spirituality. So then I tried to get to India as soon as I could, and so I arrived in Whitefield in March of 71.
I heard about the story of you seeing Swami for the first time. I'd love if you'd take a moment to just recount that situation.
So, as I said, it was a jaw-dropping moment because I came there in the morning and he didn't come out. But in the afternoon, there was the single row of men and the single row of women right near the gate, and it goes about 50 yards down the driveway. And I was expecting someone kind of light and what I consider to be Krishna-like and bouncy or upbeat or whatever. And when he came around the corner, the stanchion at the gate, and it wasn't what I expected at all. It was deeper and darker and more intense and more mysterious and more like there was very deep music playing in my mind. And it was like I was quite shocked and surprised, and my jaw just hung right open. It was like, it wasn't what I expected. And I could see him move down the lane. And he was in a very sort of spaced out mood. He's looking at the sky and he's pulling his hair and he's looking off in the distance and he's revolving his hand. And then he seemed to be moved by the thoughts of the people in the various lanes. So sometimes he would be drawn to one, and then he would back up and he would move backwards, and he did all of these different things, and it was like someone dancing on a different level, some astral level. And finally, he came by where I was, and my mouth was just hanging open. He bent down and he looked in my mouth and he laughed, and that was my first darshan.
It's funny you talk about it being, the thought of Swami being Krishna-like, and it reminds me actually of the story of the young Krishna opening up his mouth, right, and the whole universe being contained inside of it. That's wonderful. Uh, so you go to Whitefield, and then, of course, this is the very early days of Puttaparthi and what it would eventually be. So why don't you tell me about how you uh, encountered Puttaparthi, what that was like to be there in the early days, what the venue was like, and then we'll get to the World Conferences, of course.
So the early days in Whitefield, which I was there March through June, and there was a side classroom right next to the gate. And Swami let us have evening bhajans right after the evening darshan. And he would come, he would sort of show up unexpectedly, but about once a week or so. And he would sit in the chair and he would sing, or he would play the kartals and encourage other people to sing. And he would just talk, and sometimes he would space out and say unusual, unlikely things. And for instance, he would say, he'd be spacing out. He'd say, "Big war in Minneapolis," and we didn't get everyday newspapers there. We didn't get U.S. news for a couple of weeks, and sure enough, there had been some riot in Minneapolis, and so he he would do these things. One of my favorites, of course, was one time he fed us dinner in which he served each of us on a plate, on a banana plate, and he served out each of the food items and stuff like that. And I remember we were so stunned, with no one made a move. We didn't know what the protocol was, and so finally he had to say, "Eat, eat," eat. And so there were some very lovely moments there, very lovely. So we got to put a party in June.
This is of what year?
This is of 71, but we were only there for a little while because the girls' college in Anantapur was opening Guru Purnima, July of 71. And so most of us went there and were working on the college before it opened. And the president of India opened it, and we were sleeping on the roof of the main building at the Anantapur College. And one night, Swami came and walked amongst us, amongst our sleeping bags and things like that. So there were some very lovely, very, very lovely moments there.
Having visited Puttaparthi, for me at least, mostly in the early to mid 2000s, it seems like almost a world away what Puttaparthi was 30 years earlier.
The Puttaparthi itself was just basically the inner green rectangular cube, and the expanded version covering the veranda and things like that didn't happen until the mid 70s. And so it was the kind of thing where you could wander in and out of bhajan. After bhajan, the men would come out the men's door in the back, and by this time, Swami had taken arti and he had walked up the upstairs and he walked across the upper veranda, and he would be looking straight down at all the men that congregated in the back. We're all looking straight up at him, and he's looking straight down at us, like about 10 feet away. It had a tremendous power and impact. It was very, very lovely. And on top of that, things were so empty. There was no wall around the darshan area or anything like that. And Swami would walk for his meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but they weren't like regular meals. They would be like about a 10-minute thing. He'd walk across, he'd probably sample a few people's offering, and then he would walk back. And sometimes, if you're missing him, you could just go and stand there. I remember one time just standing there in front of the mandir. I was the only person there, and he walked across the upper veranda, and he's looking at me, I'm looking at him, and it was quite lovely. Yeah, it was quite a thing. In those days, the ashram was small enough that all of the women used to bring what they had cooked for dinner, and they would send it up that back stairway up to the upper where the dining room was. And Swami would take a little pinch of each one, and like it was an offering of prasad. He took a little pinch of each of the foods, and the foods were all brought back down and given out to the different women for their families.
I had just one question before we get to the World Conferences, which is for you as a person, I'd love to hear about the inner transformation that you might have had during these moments. What you obviously had gone on this journey to go to India, which I can imagine that in the early 70s was not so easy as buying a plane ticket online and and going there. And so, you could tell me a little bit about the journey that you took to get there, and then about how you felt, or perhaps even the things you learned before the World Conferences.
Well, it was a little bit like going back into the Bible because there was no running water. So you might end up coming into from Bukkapatnam on a bullock cart, or you might have to walk from Bukkapatnam to get there. You would take a shower in the bathhouse, which was actually just a bunch of bamboo mats, and you'd be taking your shower, your one penny shower, and meanwhile the world is passing you by, all of the water buffalo and things like that. It was quite moving. So being around Swami was very, very elevating, but it was also quite mysterious because at that time there was no official sadhana. There was no box, there was no organization. So it was, and some of the devotees would feel like they had come, they wanted to meet a meditation master, or they wanted some, special mantra or whatever it is they thought was going to get them enlightened. And we all were very naive. We thought enlightenment was right around the corner, and that you just do do the necessary and you get the result. But Swami was never like that. He always used to undercut that, and people would ask him about special meditations, and he'd say, "Meditation is a good way to pass the time till you come to love." And people didn't really know what to do with that. It was exalting, and being around Swami was like cruising through the atmosphere of the universe, and being around him was such a rich diet that you assumed that you were living in the clouds. You are now one of the cloud people, that you would never come down. And so there was a lot of naivete, and but it was just glorious, just glorious. Yeah.
So now we get to the World Conferences. It's interesting that you talk about how unstructured the situation was for many people coming there, and what their expectations might have been, and then what they sort of got out of it, while still perhaps transformational, or as you said, undercutting some of these notions about the preconceptions of enlightenment. Now we're also having this moment where Swami is taking this chance to also codify to some extent what he views as the path. So I'm curious to hear from your perspective what the World Conferences are even about. What was the purpose of them from your perspective?
Well, it's very hard to say because they were sort of Swami's thing. He was very into it. He liked it, and he would encourage people to come. Not everyone, but a lot of people, he would go out of his way to encourage people to come. And same with festivals generally. I had the good fortune to attend all of the world conferences with Swami, except for the first one in 1968 and the one in 1990. But the one that stood out the most for me was the second World Conference in 1975. But this was actually the first World Conference that was in Puttaparthi. So the World Conference in 1968 had people like Charles Penn and people like that. And that took place in Mumbai because there were no facilities in Puttaparthi to be able to even handle that. And it was Swami's way of saying, yes, there will be an international organization. Yes, I do have a world of devotees all over the world, and that we're going to do something with it. And that by the time 75 rolled around, there was a great hunger and anticipation. In a way, the 75 World Conference was in response to all of the people that said, Swami, tell us what to do. We want an organization. We want to be able to say to the devotees, here's our centers, here's what we're going to do, here's how we're going to make this world filled with Swami. And Swami granted that. And in 1975, he had that World Conference, and it was there were some preparations for it. A couple of things stood out. One is the visual was the stupa, which was kind of the center of where the World Conference took place. The Yajur Mandir and all that wasn't there. And the the first West building, the first South building were up, the first East building. And the place was so packed, it was so full of people that it covered the entire ground there. And also all of the roofs. All of the roofs were packed so much, so dense with people. It was almost like a question, I hope that the concrete holds up. As I said, in the center of the stupa, the groundbreaking was in Guru Purnima of 75. And a lot of us had an opportunity to help build that, which really meant lugging around dirt for the concrete and things like that. And so at the World Conference, the stupa was inaugurated. And that was, it was very moving. It was a very moving, it was sort of the center of the ashram at the time. And it also commemorated the universality of all religions, which was very apropos for this World Conference, because it basically said that this is going to be a world organization. And just before the World Organization, there were some early workings of guidelines. There was an initial document called Guidelines for the Presence that Swami dictated to Richard Baer of the Bay Area. And there's still copies of that around. And that was kind of a prototype for the center guidelines that were to come later. And one of the major highlights for me personally at the World Conference, with Swami on the stage, they announced the new members for the new U.S. Central Council, with Jack Hislop was the president, and Sidney Crystal was on, and Richard Baer, and there were about 15 other people. And I was named. It was kind of a big surprise for me, and because I was 27 at the time, and so I felt like I was this before they had the YA term. I felt like I was the YA representative for this council. So and it was lovely because you're in front of all of these people and Swami's blessing, and so that obviously made a big impression on me. Other things that were major impressions was that Swami flew over the group, flew over when everyone's out there outside on the roofs and things like that. He flew over in a helicopter, and it was for a place that just got running water just like a few months before. This was kind of a major kind of thing. It was quite stunning, and it seemed very sort of cosmic humor. And yeah, it was fun. We all loved that. So Dick Bach was there, and he was the one that I had written for information in 1969. And so I felt very close to them. I had spent some time at the Hollywood Center, and he was there, and he was leading some of the sort of Western young ones in service. And so we were working on the new Western building. We were putting in Western toilets, which was, this was pretty unheard of in Puttaparthi. And so we're each lugging a toilet bowl, and we're on the top floor there, third floor. And Swami is down below with some dignitaries. And he's pointing to us and he's laughing. And I think it must have been something that, struck them as hilarious. They got this young Westerners each with a toilet bowl in their hands.
The very first World Conference was held from May 16th through the 19th in 1968 at the Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan in Bombay, India. Sri Morarji Desai, the then Deputy Prime Minister of India, inaugurated the conference. Among the several delegates were Charles Penn from Los Angeles, Howard Murfitt from Australia, Dr. C.G. Patel from East Africa, Dr. Nallinathan from Ceylon, and Miss Indra Devi from Mexico. The event marked a foundational moment in Sai history. It signified the transition of the Sai mission from a local phenomenon to a worldwide organization, guided by Swami's powerful discourse in which he declared his identity as God incarnate and purpose, serving as the spiritual blueprint for the entire organization. In fact, Swami sent Charles Penn a personal letter inviting him for the World Conference. In the letter, Swami mentioned the purpose and his vision for such World Conferences. He said, "The World Conference is a means of bringing together all members of the Sai family under the single roof of love." He further adds, "I want to have all who are dear and near to me, and all who seek to be near and dear to me, to come and garner the joy of love." It seems like the World Conference at this time is so much of just building, and both in terms of building the place itself, but also then building the structure of what the international organization would be like. I'm wondering, at 27 years old, you're given this responsibility, as you say, to be the YA rep, sort of, and what did that feel like? You said it was a surprise. What responsibility did you feel you had to take at that point?
Well, since the organization hadn't formed yet, that was still pretty mysterious. So we didn't have the first council meeting until July. And in those days, everything was by snail mail. Even long distance phone was too expensive to really do, and there was no fax machines or any of those kinds of things. So there was just like a lot of letters going back and forth. What should we be doing? How should this go? And so our first meeting was at the conference room at Elsie Cowan's condo in Tustin, California,
What year is this now?
76.
76.
In between, there had been a lot of people had been thinking about centers, or they were just about to open a center. So many, many centers opened during that period. And as a matter of fact, I just went to the 50th anniversary of the Poughkeepsie, New York Sai Center, which was one of those. And same with the Manhattan Center. All of those came into being just in that rush. There was a sort of like Swami turned the the light switch on. It suddenly went on, and all of these things, boom, 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 happened everywhere, and it was happening all over the world, and it was really quite impressive and quite exhilarating, to put it mildly. Yeah.
You mentioned Mr. Richard Bear. I'd love to hear how he and Swami together worked on the guidelines for what this organization would be and how he wanted people across the world to sort of follow this path of love.
So first was uh, often with groups, Swami will speak to one person, kind of some sort of as almost representative of the group. So in this case, Richard was kind of informal representative of all the young Westerners that were there. And there were, when I was first there in 71, there were maybe 20 at a time. And by this time, there were maybe 100 or so that were there pretty much on a long-term basis. A lot of really wonderful people, but some of them were kind of a little bit too frisky, and some of them even were up to mischief, and so it required some guidelines. And so Swami called him in a number of times and sort of told him this and this and this should be in some guidelines to explain to this people. And as a matter of fact, I was speaking with him last night because I was asking him about, his World Conference remembrances, and what he came up with, surprisingly, was a letter from Swami in Swami's hand. And it had been years since he'd really dug into his papers, and it was there, and he had asked Swami, we were going to have a new U.S. Sathya Sai newsletter, and he asked Swami to give a letter uh, for the inauguration of that newsletter. So then the U.S. guidelines happened over the next year or two, and Jack Hislop would go back and forth, and we'd make proposals, and Swami would say this or that, and gradually it took a couple of years to sort of hammer it all out.
You mentioned also about the Jula Darshan that Swami had. I'm just, if you have any memories of that?
I know some people that got to push Swami's Jula, so that was right up there in the great blessings. I never did, but I remember him in the julep. It was so over the top. You know, it was like this giant silver structure and this giant swing and people swinging him. And it occurred to me that anyone else in this world would be totally embarrassed because it was so over the top. But it didn't concern Swami at all. It's sort of like, hey, these people want it. I'll give them what they want. I'll give them what they want till they want what I have to give.
Hmm. I'll take a moment to just think about what you said there. I'll give them what they want until they want what I have to give. It's it's so true. Sometimes we go to Swami for something we think we know what we need. And then we have to go through the process to say, wait a minute, I think Swami knows what we need. And so I have to take that in. You said that you attended 8 out of the 10 world conferences. And so I'd love to hear from your perspective uh, how these conferences built on each other and sort of what happened in the next few years.
I think just generally there was a sort of a deeper and deeper organization. So there were more wings to the organization, the education and the service and the young adults, and all of these things were added. And I can't remember which ones were added during which world conferences, but they were all part of his plan. I was saying that in Swami's lifetime, he was tightening things up. Early years, you could pretty much do whatever you wanted. You know, it was strictly up to you. He might give you a few tidbits of, you know, if he wanted to grace you with some advice, but people came and went, and you know, some were scratching their heads, "What's this about?" Some were like, "He said he was going to see me tomorrow, and he didn't," and they left in a huff. Or some people were sort of like, I'm sure next year he's going to explain to me what's going on here." So it was all kind of mysterious. But gradually it became more and more clear. So things changed over the years. And the world conferences, I'm not very good at remembering what the various initiatives were from each one, but there were. It was a way of focusing people, it was a way of showing them you're within a world of devotees and we're going to do things together.
Well, I wanted to pivot to your 2015 speech at the World Conference. I went back and watched the speech, and I found it very moving. And I wanted to take one line from it. I wanted to ask you about it. You said so simply, "When grace is overflowing, hold it." I would love for you to talk more about that and what that means to you.
Okay. So this that quote is from the book Anandadayi, and it's a English translation of a Telugu diary from the early 50s. I can't remember the name, some Andhra writer. Basically, they had gone to see Swami, and Swami was like a family member for them. It was very, very close. They and other people have said to Swami at different times, you know, you see all the people out there on Darshan line, and Swami's being so familiar with you. And I know even one American devotee, Terry Payne, was like, Swami, but what about all those other people out there? Swami said, I'm here with you. Swami has this interaction, and it's very much one on one. And we expect that all people will respond to Swami. And it's not like that. It's not like that. Swami's there for, you know, he picks out who he wants to be involved with. He said that, and he said, when grace is overflowing, hold it. He said, you should think to yourself, what am I going to do with it? You should not only hold it, but you should try and think, what can I do that will bring a good name for my Swami?
Mm, that's a nice idea. I think as a young person, even when I was a kid, I spent some time thinking about what would make Swami proud in this moment, right? So I think that's what you're talking about, and maybe it's a good reminder. It's funny because the other thing I pulled out from your speech is you said this life is not a dress rehearsal. You know, this is our time on stage with Swami, which is exactly what you're talking about. The two parts: you hold the grace that you're given, and then you take it and you have to do something with it too.
Yes, 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 yes. Good.
Yeah, as we're going into the World Conference this year in 2025, anything that stands out to you for whether it's some past memory or it's something that you're looking forward to?
In the 95 World Conference, he said something which stuck with me, which was, "Don't do what you can't say. Don't say what you can't do." Good advice, and it stuck in my brain.
As you've been talking with me, I've been thinking about this theme of the divine comedy of it all. Because it seems that in your experience, there's so much of Swami being in one moment profound and in another moment funny or letting people, you know, swing him in this jula, right? And then at the same time knowing that maybe that's not everything that it's all about. It's about something deeper too that we have to experience. I'm wondering if you had any thoughts on that, on what the purposes of that kind of comedy that Swami always had.
First of all, he gives us what we want. And I think that's must be what I wanted because I got it. And it also reminds me of Arnold Schulman's book called Baba. It was published in 1969, which I think is a fantastic book. And his book about Swami is a little bit like a musical comedy. It's sort of just sort of the style of it that there's many, many humorous things. And Swami was humorous. He enjoyed playing pranks. He knew that you didn't know. And so one times he sort of put it most directly. He said, someone was asking him, well, what about this and what about that? And Swami said, that's my business to know. And so he wasn't showing all of his cards at any moment. And he would say one thing to one person and another to another person, and they could be totally, the opposite things could be totally true for each of these different people. And he was quite the trickster. He was quite the Krishna thing. And Krishna did jokes too. And at the same time that he was, this is, of course, one of the most amazing things about Swami is that he's doing tens of things, hundreds of things, thousands of things, millions of things all at once. And it's just incomprehensible for our limited mind to really understand all of that.
I would love to hear just on a personal level, you have been involved with the Sathya Sai organization for such a long time, since you were 27 until the present. And I would love to hear what that has meant to you just in your day to day life and what growth or experience that you felt from that.
So part of it is like feeling like you're on the side of the angels. You know, you're, you're, and it's another aspect is it sort of it keeps you off the street. In other words, it keeps you sort of on the path in a way. So being part of the organization says I have this responsibility. Doesn't matter how fancy the title is, but if it's something that this means I'm doing something in the name of Satya Sai, then this is a very, very powerful thing. Means there's something going on between you and Satya Sai and the world. And you're sort of like a mediator between Satya Sai and the world. And this is a very, very powerful thing that this game, this activity is open to all the devotees. And I highly recommend it. I highly recommend it. So for me personally, I think that when I was young, I had political ambitions. Doing some of these administration things sort of has worked out that desire. It's also a blessing because you get to see all of the things that are happening around the world. You get to see, and a lot of the initiatives. Sometimes we think of these initiatives as top down, but actually, a lot of the initiatives happen bottom up. They're from devotees, and you have to be open to hearing what inspirations they're getting from Swami, and that it could be used for your organization, and that maybe that's how Swami is presenting it. So these are all very, very interesting kinds of things that have captured my attention and sort of kept me involved over the many years.
I'm curious if there's anything that you're looking forward to for Swami's 100th birthday and for the World Conference coming up in November.
Well, for the 100th birthday, not only are we attracted to nice round numbers, but it's a way of focusing on Swami and thinking about Swami and thinking about his whole life, 100 years, a century of Swami. And what does that mean? And what are we going to do with it? He's given the blessings. What's our response? What's our responsibility? What are we going to do? And so around the world, you see people doing incredible things. And so we want to see how that unfolds, what that means, what the next round is. I have no idea really, but I'm looking forward to hearing all of that and seeing all of that. So
There's so many wonderful things I think young adults can take from what you've said. But I'm wondering if you had any specific advice for young adults.
well, it's a very, very valuable time, as you know. I mean, there's people were kept bugging Swami, when's the golden age? And when's the golden age going to come? And Swami would, sort of brush them off. But finally, occasionally he'd get sort of impatient and say some people, for some people, the golden age is never going to come. And then for other people, he said the golden age is already here. And for some people, he would finally say, oh, the golden age is from 18 to 30. Basically, what it means is this is the life you're staking out. The habits you have during this period become more and more rigid as you get older. And so this is the time when you can make changes. You can make changes quickly and relatively easily. And making change is not such an easy thing. So you've got this special moment. You've got this opportunity. You've got to take it. The deal is too good.
Dr. Gosselin, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to speak with us. It's been such a joy.
Be well, everyone. Well.
And to end this episode of Love is the Path, we leave you all with a snippet of Swami's divine discourse delivered at the First World Conference. Jai Sai Ram.